Okay. Hey there, Amy. It's so great to have you on the Confidence Over Women podcast. And I'm really excited to share a little bit more about your story. And then we're going to chat.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit more about you, like your story, your recovery process, your journey, kind of where you are now, how you got here, in whatever way makes sense to you.
Sounds great. So I'm sure that my story isn't that unique, but it's been a really fulfilling and I don't know, lot of twists and turns in my journey. So I am super passionate about food, nutrition, and just feeling good so that when we show up in all aspects of our life, whether we're wearing the mom hat or the work hat or whatever hat, we just are showing up as our best selves. And I've always been super passionate about nutrition and wellness. And my mom passed away about 3 years ago, and it just compelled me to formalize that. And I think one of the ways that I was coping was doing more and just throwing myself into different things. So I got my master's of science in food and nutrition science, and I just started to formalize my experience and my just desire to try to help people use food and nutrition to help reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. So it's really been my passion project for the last couple years. But in terms of my sobriety, I still believe that I drink what I want when I want. But I really have been on this alcohol-free journey for the past few years. It coincides with my mother's passing, as well as my pursuit of my degree and just starting to formalize how I reach people through food and nutrition. And, when my mom was declining, I'm an only child, and my dad really struggled with it as well. And I took on that caretaker role and just found myself leaning towards my glass of wine more regularly. And not only was I dealing with grief and feeling horrible, I also just dealt with the repercussions of, I don't know that I would call them hangovers, but just the gray cloud that hangs over your head when alcohol becomes just part of your daily routine. And it just really started to eat away at me. And it dimmed my light. That's how I like to describe it, because it just dimmed everything. It did help me to numb, but as we all know, it's, you know, 20 minutes of feeling some sort of reprieve and then days of just feeling low and sad and just so it and I have to say, like, I just felt like a hypocrite as well, because here I was pursuing all of these wellness strategies, and I had become an expert in how nutrition could be a functional tool to help you feel better. But there I was reaching for a glass of wine at the end of the day. And so I just had to take a step back and start to really think about not only what I ate, but how I was using wine in particular as a way to cope. And so I just allowed myself the space to really learn more about how um, wine was my best frenemy and really this master of deception. So I just went on this journey I tried to moderate it first, and then realized that that was a trap, another trap. And so I just decided that being alcohol free just allows me to have the energy to have the connection with my children and my family. And so it's just gradually over time became this path that I wanted to stick with.
Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing all of that. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your mom. That must be so difficult to navigate and so many levels. And if you are a mom yourself, it's not just you, it's your children, your father, your
Yeah.
siblings, you don't have any siblings, but your people, all
Yeah.
of them, everybody is going through it. And so often grief can be so uncomfortable. And of
Yeah.
course, great reliever of that is drugs and alcohol, right? And so sometimes we
Yes.
can minimize the effects of that. Well, it's just a glass of wine, or it's just a couple glasses or whatever, because it's so normal in our community, in our society. We normalize drinking heavily. We honestly kind of revere it a little here, and
Hmm.
that's becoming an interesting shift here too. I feel like there's so many women doing alcohol-free things now. From the sober
It's
curious movement.
amazing. It is so cool. And I mean, I don't know about you, but the more I check out social media or have conversations with people, people are curious. I mean,
Yep.
the sober curious movement is a real thing. And I'm excited. I'm really excited about it because
Mm.
I don't know about you too. Like, I feel like there's just different vibe. It feels like being curious is just more acceptable. And I love seeing stories and hearing stories about how when women or really anyone just they're willing to be curious about being alcohol free, how awesome they feel. It's
Yep.
like this new lease on life. And so I'm really excited about it too. And I love walking down the aisles of my grocery store. It's like so cool to go walk down the beer aisle and see almost as many alcohol-free options as there are alcohol options for, for some drinks or some types of alcohol. But it's changing, and I'm really sensing that as well.
And it's fun because I got sober kind of a while ago, and back then it was really just we just had rehab and 12-step programs. There wasn't a lot of options, and we didn't have Quit Lit or podcasts or online meetings or programs, and so this last like 5 or 6 years or so, when I've really been diving into all of the what I call modern day recovery stuff, it's been educational for me too, and an opportunity for me to really create an identity shift when it comes to what it means to be um a woman in what I call recovery. I identify as an alcoholic. It's fine for me. Some people don't like to use that label. And I've really become familiar and becoming more comfortable with the other labels. I used to sort
Yeah.
of want to gatekeep my thing. I'm like, well, this is what we are, but it doesn't have to be that way. And that's one of the things that I love about the work I get to do with women in recovery, because we all are unique,
Yeah.
and the pathway to recovery is not just a one size fits all experience at all. And we get to design it in a variety of ways. And for me, the work that I do includes I have four main pillars, and most people who listen to the show here. And the second one is transforming daily habits and routines. And in that involves a lot of your work, right? So there's like you, I'm also extremely passionate about health and wellness. I got a second master's degree in natural health and wellness. And it was so fun and enlightening because it talked about things like the aesthetics of food and the power of sunlight and air. And
Hmm.
for me, that just resonated so much because I know that I feel better when I'm doing those things in my life on a regular basis. So it was exciting for me to be able to teach other women in our space about these
Yeah.
things. So I would ask you, what's the thing that you start with? I mean, I know where I kind of start, but I'm not a specialist in nutrition per se. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, when you're working with someone who comes to you for support in this way, where do you start?
Yeah. Are we talking just more specifically about nutrition?
Yes.
Yeah. So I start in a couple areas. But one of the things that there's probably two or three things that I will start with, just depending on the person and how on or off their nutrition might be, and also just what else is going on in their life. Sometimes the shift to a healthy lifestyle, it feels like it's a really, really big change and going to be difficult. And so again, a lot of things, there's definitely a few different factors, but one of the places that I start is two places in particular, like ditching the bag. What I mean by that is really looking at removing or limiting any ultra processed foods. So, and those are usually foods that are in a box or a bag. And, we've also heard ultra processed foods referred to as foods that have a long list of ingredients you don't recognize, or foods that you can't recreate in your own kitchen. So if we start there, and I'm a big believer when it comes to change, across the board, like having an all or nothing approach never works. So we just try to think about small and manageable changes. I call it like maybe thinking about like the one micro suck type of change, just a tiny little change, and just the power of those small changes adding up. So, for example, it might be instead of a bag of pretzels in the afternoon for a snack, as most people think, oh, that's healthy because they're low fat. But a bag of pretzels, yes, for sure, is better than a candy bar or a bag of chips, but it just got useless calories. So thinking about how might you replace that with with real food, an apple with a little bit of peanut butter. So thinking about that's an obvious first step, is just taking a look at how many foods you're eating in your day that might not be real whole foods, and looking at how do we take some small steps to change that. Another place that I almost always start, in fact, I feel like it's the one thing when I work with women in particular, we look at their protein intake, because protein, especially and by the way, like when I'm having these conversations, it's never about diet or weight loss. It's always about, how do you feel? Like, what changes do we need to think about making so that you feel good? Because I believe when you feel good or when you feel different, you will do different. It has to start with emotion first. And so protein plays a very significant role in how you feel. And when I have a chance to look at what people are eating, almost always, women in particular, they fall short of their protein intake. And so we start looking at protein and as a way to boost brain function, because when you're eating more protein, protein is helping, those amino acids are helping to create those feel good hormones like dopamine and serotonin. So we want to boost protein so that we feel good. And then protein is a great way to keep steady energy. And when we have good energy and we're feeling less hangry, that allows us to make better choices all around. So we start with our ultra processed foods, as bag and box types of foods that we're eating. And then we look at how do we boost protein intake and really make protein the focus of all meals and snacks.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I totally agree. And especially around the small, steady, I call them baby steps to create sustainable change. It's something we talk about a lot here, because when we try to put too much on
Yeah.
people, too much too soon, it's like the New Year's resolution stuff, right? You know, how many people really stick with like I'm going to go to the gym every day, and like if that's not sustainable for your lifestyle, that probably wasn't a great choice. But if you said, well, what are you willing to commit to? You could say, well, I could get there 3 times a week. Okay, great. Well, let's start with
Yeah.
that. It's the same with food too. And so the the process food is amazing on. Are you there? Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm here.
Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Huh.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. Yeah. So I feel like a lot of times can you hear me now? Yeah. When
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
When people are assessing their food, they either grossly under or overestimate what they're consuming. And so doing a proper inventory of that is so critical, right? So I don't know if
Yeah,
you do that same kind of thing, but people using
I
like a
do.
food log to say like, well, what are you actually consuming? Because if you say to someone, tell me about your food or whatever, or tell me how much processed food you eat, and they'll be like, well, I don't eat that many processed foods. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Well, like let's see it. And then you're like, oh well, I eat yogurt in the morning, and then I have a granola bar for a snack, and then I have pretzels as a snack in the afternoon, and I get like a sandwich, or I use a boxed macaroni and cheese or something for dinner. So and then we find out like, oh, quickly they are consuming, quite a bit, and they didn't even
Yeah.
realize it either. So those food logs, I feel like, I don't know if you use that, but I feel like that's super helpful.
I do too, but I think that even the food logs, like the importance of scale, the scale to like a food scale. I'm not a big proponent of that as a long-term strategy because that creates some unhealthy habits.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, the food scale is one of my first steps. Like it is the best way to have a reality check because I agree 100%. Almost everybody believes they're eating healthy foods, but just understanding the volume and the quantity. I've got a funny story. When I was first heading on a healthy journey, I had my last child about 16 years ago, and I gained a lot of weight. I was gestational. I just had a bigger appetite, and I was cool with that. But I decided, after some time, I'm like, let's get a reality check. And so I started to log my food, and I had the same thing. I had the same perception. I'm eating pretty healthy. And at the time, I was a big fan of my coffee in the morning with cream.
Mm.
And I had to have it nice and warm and creamy. And so I ended up I remember where I was like, oh my goodness, I was eating hundreds of calories of in a day based upon how creamy the size of the mug and how much cream I was using. So it's always a great best practice to do exactly what you said. Just take inventory and just give yourself a reality check and weigh those foods. You can get a sense. It's a good education tool as well for the long run. Like, oh, okay, so this is really what a dollop of peanut butter is, and what the right or what a adequate size is based upon what I thought it was. So
So true. I mean, sometimes it can be annoying. I've been in many phases of that. I've been in very, very strict regimented phases where I've been training for something specific or trying to get a specific body type or composition. So it's been intense. And I agree with you. It's not always the best thing. And it's not for everybody. But even now, like I'm kind of come back to it, circled back around just to kind of help me gauge because I'm a girl who kind of likes to eat. I just really like to eat, and I do find that I'm hungry a lot. But the portion sizes. I'm older. I don't know how I'm 48, and so but our youngest kids are the same age. So
yeah, I'm older than you. Just put it that way.
okay, well,
I've passed the 50 mark.
my youngest child is also 16, and I find that you just can't consume the same amount of food you used to love to enjoy, and so that's been for me. So I've been really trying to get back to just gauging, being like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, instead of just pouring stuff in the bowl, even though I eat mostly healthy foods, again, it is about that quantity.
yeah,
I love what you said about the protein, and I do think that that's a real missing link, I think, in the education of women, but I do see it coming around a little bit more. Like in the information that
yeah.
I do see it being talked about by other women, like female
Mhm.
practitioners who study nutrition and use it in their practices. And I'm glad to see because I find that so many women, probably particular our age too, who grew up on, you know, kind of a different way. We just grew up a
Yeah.
different way.
Yeah, and I mean, my suggestion to most women, if you're curious about what you're eating and if you're eating enough, I like the general rule of thumb is we should be eating the our ideal weight in grams of protein.
Mm.
So if you're 150 pounds, that's your ideal weight. You would want to be targeting about 150 grams of protein.
Right.
So you don't only if you're new to this, the only way you're going to know that is to buy a $10 scale. It's really easy to get in a day off Amazon and just get curious about it. Say, okay. But and it's that's usually one of the best practices is aim for that level of protein, and it might sound like a lot to some. Does that seem like a lot to you?
That's actually the target that I have, and I've and times in my life I've found that it sounds like a lot, but it's fairly attainable. I also find that sometimes I find that sometimes it's challenging to reach that within the calorie range. And
Yeah,
so that's a struggle for me at times. But I think that I like that. I think it's appropriate, and I
yeah,
like the way it makes me feel. I feel more satiated and full. I feel satisfied. I do think it helps with all those other things, including sleep, energy levels,
yeah.
and weight management. If that is something you want to have in your life, it's
Hmm.
supportive for that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about your work with women in recovery. Is that your main focus in your practice?
So my main focus is really using food and nutrition to feel good. So I might work with people like I may work with people who come to me because they want to avoid cholesterol meds and their doctor said you got to get control over your diet.
Mhm.
So my primary focus is helping women and men understand how the choices they make about what they eat or drink, how that can manifest into feeling good or helping them solve problems with how they feel. And you almost every single person I coach or the women I talk to, the secondary objective is how do we remove alcohol from our lives or try to limit what we're drinking. It's generally not sometimes the first reason people are coming to me, but it's usually a huge factor in why they don't feel good or why they aren't losing weight or what's impacting some of their just some of the other medical issues in their life. So it's and I have worked with a few women who just want to feel like it's more small and irrelevant in their life. But I'm a little more holistic in how I look at things.
I love that. I was curious about it because I find that people who have like an addiction bent, which probably all of us do on some level.
Yeah.
However, many of us are very different, right? So those of us who have that style, for me in particular, and people like me, can pick other things. So like I've been sober for kind of
Yeah.
a long time, right? And so then there have been times in my life where, especially in these older years, food has become kind of a problem, like a little bit of an addiction, I would say.
Yeah.
A little bit more emotional eating has kind of come into play. And I hear this from a lot of women, particularly like middle-aged women who are like 30s and 40s who are really going through their own identity shifts too. I think, this is a
Mhm.
stage of life typically where our children, if we have them, are aging. They might be going to college, they're just kind of pulling away, becoming teenagers. You might be struggling with teenagers, and that's what happened with us, right? We were just going through a lot of challenges, but turning to food because it was a substance that I could
Mhm.
use to self-soothe was what happened for me. And I know this is the experience of so many other people. And so I was curious if you have experience with that. And if you do, could you say a little bit more about what that's like and how you help them?
Yeah, well, I have to share with you, like I completely to relate with what you may have been experiencing, some of your listeners. I am a mom of three boys, all a year apart. I just turned 50. I had a kid leave home for college. I've got teenage stuff that I deal with. So I think those were also factors in why I turned to wine as a coping mechanism. And so I've had to figure out ways to replace that and not turn to food as a coping mechanism
Yeah.
too. So I can relate just with the stresses of life and the changes in life. So that spoke to me when you said that. And I agree with you. I mean, you can substitute food, smoking, social media. I mean, there's a lot that you can substitute for drinking that is all about looking for the same sort of effect, whether that's release, relief,
Hmm.
break from reality. And I believe there's a sort of a similar approach to how we need to be dealing with other vices like that. And so, I when I think about whether emotional eating, as you mentioned, one of the strategies, in fact, I try to be take the hard line with this with my clients. Like if we're gonna work together, I need your commitment that you'll be willing to really do some of the hard work. And it's an inside job, whether it's recovery from alcohol or it's emotional eating. We've got to be willing to be curious about our habits and those situations, those data points we have when we binge on certain food, we overindulge, or we have a data point and we drink when we don't want to drink or drink more than we want to drink. And so, what I like to do is encourage people to pause for even if it's just a minute, but to literally put pen to paper or notes in a phone and just have a place where you give yourself a chance to reflect on that and really think about, okay, So I ate that. How did it make me feel? And how did it make me behave? And was it true? Meaning, did that give me the relief? And so by making that a habit to journal or just record those moments or those data points, you start to realize your patterns and start to realize what the underlying issues are that lead you to make those choices. And when we get at the root, some of those root issues, it just shines a light on it, and then we can start to think about, okay, so it's the time of day. When I was drinking wine every day, it no matter what, like by around 3 or 4, I start to think about that being the thing to help me. That equaled end of day, relax. And it was really a ritual that I needed to break, but I didn't realize that until I got really curious about it. I sort of leaned into, okay, so what time is it happening? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking about wine at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? So, but that allowed me to then get into solutioning mode. Okay, so if that's the time, what can I replace that with?
Mhm.
How might I think about using the time? And it's almost like a magic trick, Shelby. Once you are allowing yourself rather than white knuckling it and trying to just stick with your plan of not eating a certain way or stick with a plan of not drinking, and you just let yourself feel what you need to feel and really examine those feelings, it's like a magic trick. You start to get at, oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's also very similar to problem drinking, right? So if you in that world, we kind of talk about things like thinking it all the way through. I mean, you can
yeah,
think about the same thing when it comes to food. So yesterday I was having an obsession about these pizza bites that I made my son that were in my fridge, and I have been really on a great course here for the last 3 weeks. I was off the rails a little bit there, where I was really kind of consuming a lot of like sugar and just processed foods, which isn't my normal way, but I was just in like a little bit of a rut. And I finally had gotten to the space where I was like, okay, let's get it together. You know how to do this. Like I wasn't
yeah,
feeling good. I was starting to have disrupted sleep, these things that I don't want in my life. So I was like, I know exactly how to do that. I just get back to the strategies and tools I
hmm,
know work for me. And so I've been on this great path. And so I was having this weak moment and I was probably overtired. I think I'm a little hormonal, who knows? And I was like
yeah.
obsessing about these things. And so I went through all of I went through all the phases. I'm really being vulnerable with this here, right? But I was
Thank
like
you.
staring at the container, like I even opened it and I like touched it. And I was like, some people would be like, you should intuitively eat. And this means your body is saying and I always laugh and joke when people say you should try intuitive eating because
No,
I can't use that because I just
me
would
neither.
intuitively eat ice cream and pizza all day.
I'd
But
eat the whole thing.
yeah.
Like if I
And
was
so
intuitively eating, that's
I would eat
it.
the pizza and ice cream and every day.
Yeah.
So I was like, I had to really work hard on it. And I did that though. I was like, for once, I was like, what is going on with you right now? Like
Mhm.
what is going on with you right now? Like what are you feeling? Like, why do you want this? And I was just wanting a something. I was just wanting
Yeah.
to feel good, a pleasure. I was feeling just like whatever, bored even. Like I just wanted a something and I'm like, why don't you just like go watch a show for 45 minutes, or just
Yeah.
like go lay down and take a quick snooze. So I was able to like talk myself through that and it felt really powerful. Like this is so silly, but like it felt very empowering to be able to kind of take control in that moment. Because
Yes.
then I know I can remember that and I'll be like, it just gets filed away in my brain, right?
Yeah.
So the next time I'm faced with something similar, I can be like, wait a second, let's think this all the way through. Because then it's going to set me on. I know what that's going to do then. I'm going to start having more cravings for more carbohydrates, more sugar, and then I probably might consume more. And it's going to really reset my entire system that I've just spent so much time trying to get back in alignment.
Yeah.
And I really want to do that. And so I was glad that I was able to kind of assess the situation, ask myself a quick question. What are you feeling right now? What's going on? And generally speaking, for me, it's really about, except for in extreme emotions, right? In the high emotional times where I might really be sad or frustrated or just afraid, a lot of
Yeah.
fear. That's when I really I want it to go away.
Yeah.
I want to eliminate it, like the wine you were saying.
Yeah.
I love your replacement idea. I had a client
Mhm.
years ago. I can't remember who said that I think she was struggling with evening eating, like later night evening, because that's when she talked to her mom every day. and her mom passed away. And so she talked to her mom most of the time in the evenings. And so she was really struggling with like, what do I do with this time? You know,
Right.
how do I fill this void in my life? And so we talked about different strategies for self-soothing in that time, you know, and it can look very simple, like, you know, taking a really long bath or
Mhm.
watching a show, or maybe meeting a friend for a walk at that time. You know,
Yeah.
there's or doing a meditation. There's a lot of things. There's probably lists out there on Google that we can
Yeah.
very
But that's a
quickly.
really like I mean, I love to convey the point that, if you're feeling stuck in whatever type of patterns, whether again, we've talked about drinking or emotional eating, it's really not only a habit issue. Like there are grooves, neural pathways in your
Yes.
brain that are patterned your brain knows to expect certain combinations, whether you're upset and I eat, or at this time of day, I have a glass of wine. And so we have to reprogram. And it doesn't take many times, but we truly have to get active about it, activate the new pathway, the new pattern. So it's got to be something that's action oriented. So sometimes I suggest literally, if you could be having the pint of ice cream, but go outside, move with it. And it's amazing. It's just as a change of scenery, or we shift the environment, that it just opens our eyes and we start to think and feel differently.
It's beautiful. Um, what are some other things that you use or teach that are really practical tools
Yeah,
for either self-soothing, or just not even we're not even talking about the emotional piece, but just in formulating these new um, they are habits, they are habit changes, but also very much a lifestyle. And it's the shifting of the mind into, I'm doing this for, you know, to lose weight, or I'm doing this for this thing, versus I'm doing this because I want to feel good, which is what your whole
sure.
stick is, which I love.
Yeah.
So maybe you can say more about that.
I sure can. I mean, I have a couple practical strategies that just help people to start the change process, because I think it's again, you could insert any typical scenario, but when you start to go off the rails, sometimes it's hard. It's really hard to get something to stick and get that change and just pivoting into the right direction. I actually just went through this myself, and you talked about I've been a little off the rails. I did an endurance event about 2 weeks ago. So I'm an endurance athlete.
Hmm.
I'm a type 2 fun kind of person, if you've heard of that. It's
Like
our
an
type.
Enneagram 7.
No, type 2, like type 1 fun is like haha laugh. Type 2
Oh,
fun is typically doing when you do something hard and then right
yes.
after you say it's fun or it feels good. So I'm
Right,
a type
right.
2 kind of
I
person.
think I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
I've run 5 marathons. I understand.
You understand, yeah. So I would do these endurance events, and I just did one, and it was so hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done mentally. I
Oh,
was on Stratton Mountain, and it
oh,
rained, and the entire time I was doing it, I climbed the equivalent of Mount Everest
oh
in
my
about
gosh.
24 hours. So it was super tough. And when I've done these before, I know when I get back, like I can have no I don't want I don't want to do anything that's goal oriented. I just want to do whatever I want. I'm not going to exercise a lot. I'm recovering and I just want to eat and drink whatever I want. Like if I want a smoothie or I just want to I don't want to just be good to myself. And
Yeah.
so have the bowls of pasta or the cookies, whatever I want. And so I give myself about 2 weeks, but it's always so hard after, like, because when you start getting in those habits that aren't so good, it's really hard to redirect. So I always find myself in the same spot, like, oh, this is going to be hard, or I can't be as consistent as I want. So I had to walk my own walk, eat my own dog food. And so I have a process to remember. I call it the 10-10-1.
Mm.
And so these are short and a simple, practical approach to restarting and rebooting your healthy patterns. So it's 10 minutes of high intensity workout. Like you don't need to do more. And generally, if you start with 10 minutes, you'll usually do more, but it's not like a casual walk. It's 10 minutes where your heart rate is above like a zone 2. You're huffing and puffing. You got to sweat. So first, you're doing that in the morning. That's the first thing you're doing. So 10 minutes of some sort of activity. And then it's 10 minutes of planning time. I work with a lot of busy women who just don't have a lot of time to think about what steps they need to take to stay healthy throughout the day. So we're not thinking past the day. It's 10 minutes. Like, what are the situations that may cause me to do the thing that I don't want to do? And what steps will I take? It could be packing my lunch. It could be setting up my food. It could be putting a sticky note somewhere, but I'm going to give myself 10 minutes. And a lot of my clients, I'm like, do it while you're getting your kids ready in the morning. Like you're getting them breakfast. You can invest 10 minutes to think through, not tomorrow, but that day. What steps can I take so I'm healthy and I'm good to me?
Mm-hmm.
And then the one is one promise to yourself, one commitment that you know you'll keep. Could be, and it's got to be not something challenging. This is a promise that you know you can keep to stick with your goals or stick with a healthy habit. Because once we have a few days of success under our belt, we start to build momentum. And really, that's what we're after with 10-10-1. How can I change my thinking? By sweating a little bit, I do that. How can I invest in myself? 10 minutes is doable. And then the one promise that I know I can keep. A couple of days of that, we just start to get our confidence. And we start to get our confidence and then can continue the pattern.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love to be able to give our listeners actual things they can start today. And that is one of them. I hope everybody caught that. If you didn't, make sure you rewind, re-listen to it. 10-10-1. That is gold. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
Amy, this has been so much fun chatting with you and getting to know you a little bit better and sharing just what we have a lot of commonality in and related to health and nutrition and wellness. It's something that I know I'm very passionate about, mostly for, disease prevention and just for feeling good. We, like you mentioned in the beginning, when we feel better, we do better, we are better, we look better, and all of those things matter to us. And if they don't right now, they probably will when you feel good.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah. Can I leave you with a parting thought that I I think super important to your listeners that, whether it's with diet or drinking or whatever the thing is, I just think we have to give ourselves grace. It's never going to be a straight path. And I think the more we can be compassionate and give ourselves grace, it leaves us feeling more hopeful, which means that we don't get stuck for so long. So grace is actually a really powerful tool. So you can find me at foodandmoodlab.com. And I've got a nice Facebook following for those of you on Facebook or Instagram. So some communities out there where you can connect and ask questions. So you can find all of those socials at foodandmoodlab.com.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure. I love, by the way, your parting thought. I completely agree about giving yourself grace. And one of the blessings that I think, and maybe you'll agree, of getting a little older is the wisdom and the freedom that come from that. I have found that it's been in my journey much easier to extend that grace to myself today than it was in my younger years. Much more confidence today to be able to be okay in whatever is happening in that day, and also to know that the sun will set today and will rise again, and we get another opportunity to do things again. There is always space for that. And so thank you for sharing that. I love that. I'll make sure I link all of that below, your website and your socials. Go find her, check her out. Let's make sure we are learning about nutrition. We're learning and asking questions about what it means to be healthy and to live well when we're feeding our bodies properly. And just thank you so much again for your wisdom. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I appreciate